that while filming your popular reality TV show, the man you believed was your daughter Elite's father was not. Uncle, the defendant, Mr. Randolph, may be her biological father, that it was devastating to find out that the man you believed was your dad was not, that his brother is your father. Both you and your brother had a sexual relationship with Ms. Lon. You do not believe you are her biological father either.
30 years ago, and you know my past has always haunted me no matter what. I learned a lot from it. I could be dead for the things I used to do, but I'm not gonna quit until my daughter and me put closure on who her father is.
They think of you and they say, oh, the antics, the drama. But I know you, I've talked to you. You're a mother, you have heart, courage.
And these tears is for her. She still has to live with my mistakes.
When the truth is buried beneath years of pain, addiction, and broken promises, there comes a day when it refuses to stay hidden. And in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, truth doesn't just surface, it transforms lives. Because here, on this stage of evidence, the human heart becomes Exhibit A. And every DNA test isn't just a piece of science. It's a doorway to redemption, regret, and sometimes ruin. The courtroom stands silent, a place where stories of loss, love, and betrayal are translated into the language of law. Judge Lauren Lake sits with that rare calm of a woman who has witnessed the full spectrum of human emotion. Her courtroom isn't merely a stage for evidence. It's where souls confess, where the law meets the raw truth of humanity. The cameras may capture the tears, but it's the unspoken words, the trembling silence, the hesitant breath that define these moments. This case, like many others, is not just about paternity. It's about identity, about the concept of justice in jurisprudence when emotion and evidence collide. It's a space where the relationship between law and justice feels both fragile and eternal. A mother seeking closure, a daughter longing for truth, and men haunted by choices they made decades ago. Each enters this courtroom with a story written in pain. Judge Lauren Lake listens not merely as a legal authority, but as a mother, counselor, and witness to human contradiction. Her courtroom is not about punishment, it's about clarity. Here, a DNA test is more than science. It is a mirror reflecting who we were, who we are, and sometimes who we wish we were. For many, that test feels like a lifeline. For others, it becomes the moment they regret most, proof that people regret taking the test when truth overturns the foundation they once stood on. This story, drawn from the heart of paternity court, unfolds like a real-life moral thesis on accountability. When Frankie Lawns, a woman whose past struggles with addiction became public knowledge, steps forward, she doesn't come as a celebrity mother or as the figure behind the gossip columns. She stands as a survivor. Her health had failed her once, her choices even more so, but now she seeks only the peace of truth. Her daughter, raised in the confusion of unanswered questions, embodies every child who has ever wondered, who am I really? Judge Lauren Lake looks into the eyes of both women, mother and daughter, and sees the fracture between them. The mother who wants to make amends, the daughter who wants answers, not excuses. In the Truth Changes Everything podcast, this kind of story would be dissected as an emotional journey toward redemption. But here, under oath, redemption has to stand the test of evidence. And so begins the careful unraveling of decades of silence. Frankie admits her past, drugs, the chaos, the bad choices, the men who came and went. She speaks not for pity but for understanding, a living Celebrate Recovery testimony. Her pain, once hidden behind laughter and denial, now becomes her testimony of growth. She confesses her mistakes because she knows her daughter deserves the truth, no matter how late it arrives. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges her courage. There's something profoundly sacred about a parent choosing honesty over image. The courtroom breathes differently in those moments. the kind of honesty that cannot be rehearsed. Her daughter listens, torn between love and resentment. She has spent her entire life running from a story she couldn't explain. Raised by adoptive parents who gave her safety but not answers, she grew into a woman with questions too heavy to carry. Adoption stories often end in gratitude, but hers is shadowed by confusion. It's not that she doesn't love the family that raised her. It's that she still feels like a chapter was ripped from her own book. As Judge Lake guides the questioning, she leans into the balance between empathy and discipline, a quality that makes her more than a television judge. She understands that every lie in a family's history leaves behind emotional debris. And sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about cleaning up the mess left by secrets. The men called to the stand are not villains. They are remnants of a past culture, of a generation where love, lust, and chaos blended in reckless rhythm. The bandmates who once lived like legends now stand in the cold light of consequence. They speak of the past with nostalgia, but also with discomfort. Their fame once shielded them, but in this court, adverse inference in the Evidence Act reminds everyone that silence can imply guilt, that the absence of proof doesn't erase responsibility. Lauren Lake's Courtroom is not just about establishing paternity, it's about restoring dignity. Every episode, every case, becomes a philosophical debate between truth and mercy. And as the world watches, it becomes evident that the DNA test is no longer just a tool of science, it's a test of character. The Game-Changing Attorney podcast once described how modern law often fails to capture the emotional essence of justice. But Judge Lake does something different. She lets emotion breathe in her courtroom, not as weakness but as context. Law, to her, is not mechanical, it's moral. It's the study of human error wrapped in the language of logic. As the mother speaks about the past, about her choices, about her time lost to addiction, her words become more than an apology, they're evidence. Not in the legal sense, but in the human one. They prove that people can change, that guilt can evolve into courage, and that redemption is the hardest kind of truth. For her daughter, however, this truth isn't gentle. It cuts deep. It questions her entire foundation. The man she once thought was her father, the family she built her identity around. She recalls feeling shame as a child when she learned she was adopted, shame that shouldn't have existed, but did because society often measures worth by bloodlines. Now, sitting in Judge Lake's courtroom, she realizes that finding out who her biological father is may not heal her, but it might finally silence the echo of doubt that has followed her all her life. Judge Lake understands this pain intimately. She reminds everyone that the law's role is not just to uncover facts, but to create peace. Justice, she often says, is not only about evidence, it's about emotional closure. And in that simple truth lies the philosophy that defines her court. The daughter explains how growing up adopted filled her with gratitude, but also with yearning. She speaks about how she tried to find her biological family, how every lead turned into disappointment. She learned that the man listed on her birth certificate wasn't her father, that her real father might be one of several men, and that decades of confusion had left her emotionally fragmented. Her story resonates deeply with viewers who follow adoption stories, full episodes, each one revealing how the law tries to reconcile blood with belonging. At this point, even the audience feels the weight of this generational wound. Frankie cries not for herself, but for her daughter's lost years. She says she is proud that her daughter became strong despite her, that she wants to put closure on who her father is. These aren't lines rehearsed for television. They are the purest kind of confession. In the Divorce Course podcast, legal experts often say that the stage in a divorce case where evidence matters most is not always the courtroom. It's the moment someone finally tells the truth. Judge Lake embodies that wisdom here. For this family, evidence is not a document or a file, it's memory. It's regret turned into words. And when the men, the alleged fathers, speak, they do so with a mix of regret and denial. They describe their youth, the wild nights, the blurred lines between loyalty and desire. One of them admits that he can't say for certain if he was with the mother during the time of conception. Another distances himself with a phrase that has become the defense of generations. It wasn't like that back then. Judge Lauren Lake listens, and though she maintains her judicial composure, her eyes reflect something deeper, a recognition of how easily people abandon responsibility when truth becomes inconvenient. In her mind, the concept of justice in jurisprudence is not merely theoretical. It's personal. It's what happens when law confronts human nature head-on. Every case before her feels like a moral sermon wrapped in evidence. Every family torn apart by secrets stands as proof that truth, though painful, is always redemptive. And as the court approaches the DNA results, the atmosphere changes. The silence becomes thick with anticipation, the kind that comes before revelation. As the courtroom edges toward revelation, a strange stillness takes over. The truth sits somewhere between fear and hope, and everyone present can feel its weight. Judge Lauren Lake looks over the faces before her, each etched with anticipation, guilt, or disbelief. The DNA test results rest quietly on the bench, but their presence feels almost divine, as if justice itself has been sealed inside that envelope. For the mother, it is redemption she seeks. For the daughter, it is clarity. For the alleged fathers, it is accountability. And for Judge Lake, it is the timeless balance between law and justice, a balance that no statute, no courtroom, and no Supreme Court ruling can perfectly define. Because justice in its purest form is not cold. It breathes, it trembles, it cries when truth finally emerges. As the evidence unfolds, Judge Lake reminds everyone that science may confirm the truth, but it is courage that brings people to this moment. The DNA test is both a miracle and a curse, a piece of paper that can heal or destroy families. It is a modern paradox that has redefined what it means to seek justice in personal life. On one hand, people demand truth. On the other, many quietly admit that people regret taking the test once that truth arrives. For decades, families have built narratives around assumption. Fathers have raised children out of love rather than biology. Mothers have buried secrets to protect their peace. And when the results arrive, when the truth changes everything, what remains is not just broken trust, but a question that every human heart must answer. Can love survive proof? Judge Lauren Lake's voice carries the authority of law but the empathy of someone who understands pain. To her, every case is a reflection of the concept of justice in jurisprudence, the idea that fairness must include feeling. She has seen evidence and emotion clash countless times, yet she believes in both. Because evidence may tell us what happened, but emotion tells us why. In the Divorce Course podcast, attorneys often describe the evidence stage in divorce cases as the most unforgiving, where hidden texts, bank statements, and surveillance become the language of heartbreak. But here, in paternity court, the evidence isn't financial, it's biological. It is written in blood and chromosomes, leaving no room for denial. There are no appeals in DNA. The science doesn't flinch. Yet even as the science speaks, humanity weeps. The young woman, the daughter, feels her chest tighten. For years, she has dreamed of this moment, and now she dreads it. She wants to know who her real father is, but she also fears the emptiness that may follow if the answer leads nowhere. She remembers every whisper from childhood, every question that lingered behind her adoption. She recalls how she was told she was lucky, yet she always felt something missing, a thread that tied her to a truth she could not see. The world may watch this moment as entertainment, as one of many adoption stories' full episodes, but for her, it is not content, it is closure. And closure, Judge Lake knows, rarely comes easily. The first name is read. The first result declared. He is not the father. The courtroom sighs, not in surprise, but in the exhaustion that comes when hope dies slowly. The mother's hands tremble. She had convinced herself that this time it would be different. This time, maybe the years of guilt would find their meaning. Judge Lauren Lake does not let the moment turn into despair. She understands that a no in DNA is not a verdict on love or worth. It is merely the clearing of fog, a necessary step toward truth. This result, she often explains, doesn't erase the past, it defines it. The second envelope follows. Another potential father, another history of mistakes, another heartbeat racing in suspense. When his name is cleared as well, silence consumes the courtroom. The daughter's eyes fill, not just with tears but with decades of confusion collapsing into one instant. The truth has arrived, but it brings no comfort. The truth, as always, is impartial. And yet, within that pain lies the most powerful aspect of Judge Lake's court: healing. She does not end cases when results are read. She begins the journey of emotional repair. Her rulings may be final in law, but her words open pathways for reconciliation, forgiveness, and personal transformation. It is this balance between stern law and soft humanity that defines her legacy. The relationship between law and justice becomes visible in her tone, her empathy, her insistence that people face truth not as punishment but as liberation. She reminds the mother that every act of honesty redeems a fragment of the past. She tells the daughter that knowing who her father isn't is still progress. It removes confusion, making room for peace. The story may seem finished to the audience, but inside the courtroom, everyone knows that the hardest part is yet to come. The mother and daughter must rebuild not from truth, but from aftermath. Because the truth alone changes everything, but understanding that truth changes you. As the episode transitions, the next case begins, a story that mirrors the same theme of fragile trust and medical mystery. A husband, broken by suspicion, questions whether his wife's child is truly his. He cites her behavior, her nights away, her excuses. She defends herself with the same conviction that once defined their love. It is here that Judge Lauren Lake again becomes more than a judge. She becomes a philosopher of pain, translating private chaos into public understanding. This second story, titled "His Health Issues Make Him Question Paternity," is not about fame or decades-old mistakes. It's about the present-day fractures that occur when illness and insecurity meet. The husband's health issues become a metaphor for his emotional vulnerability. Illness made him feel less like a man, and that doubt infected his marriage. What began as love turned into suspicion. His wife's compassion turned to exhaustion, and in that space, betrayal found its shadow. When he learned she had been drinking, staying out late, and collapsing under emotional pressure, his heart began to retreat behind the wall of mistrust. He believed she had been unfaithful. He asked for a DNA test, not out of hatred but fear. Because when sickness weakens the body, insecurity weakens the mind. And yet, Judge Lake sees beneath the surface. She recognizes the pattern, how easily love deteriorates when honesty disappears. She reminds both of them that truth is the only medicine that heals both heart and relationship. Their story becomes one of the most emotional DNA test cheating stories the courtroom has witnessed. The wife, holding back tears, swears her loyalty. She explains her illness, her despair, her drinking, and the night she blacked out. Her honesty is both heartbreaking and human. She does not claim perfection, she claims pain. Judge Lake listens, not as a judge but as a woman who knows that marriage is rarely destroyed by one act. It's destroyed by silence that grows between two hearts. She quotes, almost softly, Injustice in love begins when people stop telling the truth. The words echo across the courtroom like a quiet sermon. At that moment, the adverse inference in Evidence Act becomes more than legal jargon. It becomes a symbol. The husband, by doubting, has drawn his own inference. He has assumed guilt from silence. The wife, by not remembering, has left space for suspicion. Both are victims of assumption. Both are desperate for proof. The DNA results come, but before reading them, Judge Lake speaks of compassion. She says the supreme court of the human spirit is not reason, it is forgiveness. The people who come to her courtroom are not criminals. They are wounded souls trying to reconcile love and truth in a world that offers neither easily. She reminds them, and the world, that law can guide us, but only grace can heal us. When the results are finally revealed, the tension shatters into emotion. The husband is indeed the father. Relief floods the room, but it is not triumphant. It is humbling. The man weeps not for victory, but for all the nights he doubted love. The woman cries not for vindication, but for the trust she lost along the way. In that moment, Judge Lauren Lake turns the verdict into a lesson, not about evidence, but endurance. You see, she says, truth didn't just prove paternity, it restored humanity. Her words could easily be replayed in Any Truth Changes Everything podcast episode. Because that's exactly what her court does. It changes everything, one truth at a time. For those watching, it's more than courtroom drama. It's philosophy in motion. A rare fusion of the game-changing attorney podcast energy and celebrate recovery testimonies, wrapped in the language of empathy. Viewers realize that behind every legal document lies a living soul. Behind every verdict lies a silent prayer that justice will not only be done but felt. The husband and wife leave the courtroom hand in hand, their tears now mingling with something rare, hope. Judge Lake watches them go, knowing that this, too, is part of justice. The law may demand accountability, but true justice demands compassion. As the cameras fade, she reflects on her work, not as entertainment but as ministry. She knows that every day in her courtroom adds another verse to the long story of human redemption. In her eyes, the courtroom is sacred ground, not because of authority, but because of truth. It is where people confront themselves under oath, and in doing so, begin to heal. When the cameras turn off and the courtroom empties, Judge Lauren Lake remains seated for a while, quiet, reflective, and still absorbing the emotions that have filled the space. Her bench is more than a symbol of authority. It's a sanctuary for truth, a sacred place where ordinary people come to lay down the burdens they've carried for years. The law may be her profession, but healing, that's her calling. In the silence that follows every verdict, she knows that justice doesn't end with a DNA result. It begins there. The ink on the test may dry, the envelopes may close, but the story of what truth does to the human heart continues long after the show is over. That's the paradox she's come to understand. People come to court seeking answers, but what they really find is themselves. Every case she hears becomes a reflection of the concept of justice in jurisprudence, a living, breathing argument about what fairness truly means when emotion and evidence collide. The Supreme Court may interpret constitutional justice, but Lauren Lake interprets emotional justice. She reminds us that the relationship between law and justice is not mechanical, it's spiritual. One governs behavior, the other redeems it. The stories that pass through her courtroom often share one painful pattern: broken trust. Whether it's a mother confronting her past, a father in doubt, or a couple torn apart by betrayal, the root is always the same: truth delayed too long. It's the same truth explored in countless cheating stories, adoption stories, and divorce disputes where evidence is both savior and destroyer. And yet, amid this chaos, something miraculous happens. People change. Regret transforms into responsibility. Shame becomes testimony. Many who once hid behind lies find themselves on their own journey of recovery, spiritual, emotional, and moral. The same courage that drives them to take a DNA test often leads them to celebrate recovery testimonies afterward, because healing begins the moment you stop defending the lie. Judge Lake knows this too well. She's witnessed men break down in tears after denying a child for years, only to learn the child was theirs all along. She's watched women carry the guilt of silence for decades, finally choosing truth over protection. She's seen daughters find closure after a lifetime of confusion, and each time, the courtroom transforms from a battleground into a sanctuary. But justice isn't always gentle. Sometimes it demands accountability. That's when Judge Lake's tone changes, firm but never cruel. In cases involving child support, she reminds parents that financial responsibility is not punishment, it's participation. A father who pays support does not lose dignity, he fulfills duty. A mother who enforces it isn't seeking revenge, she's protecting the child's right to stability. The Supreme Court of morality demands no less. Through her lens, child support is a moral law, not just a legal one. It is the continuation of love, expressed through consistency rather than proximity. She often says that money cannot buy love, but it can sustain opportunity, and that too is justice. Each case echoes like a sermon about human imperfection. The Divorce Course podcast might analyze the